What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield, hanging out in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and try and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network, DraftKingsNetwork.com, YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, all that good stuff. We're sorry about the delay on YouTube yesterday. Some technical difficulties popped up, but we got it there for you, and we appreciate y'all being patient. Clay Matthews back on the show again today. I guess I should specify Clay Matthews the third, Dad, since there are a lot of other There are Clays Matthews in that family, all of pretty strong notes. So we've got the youngest Clay Matthews on here again to talk about his former coach and a number of other things this weekend. And you keep ignoring Clay Matthews because apparently you're expecting his father or one of his other relatives.
I'm ignoring it, and I apologize for that. And you're right. Clay Sr. started this whole thing in the 1949 NFL draft, and then Clay, who you talked to, the third's dad, who I played in my era, against his, Bruce Matthews. That was always the classic matchup. I keep skipping the interview because I don't rate as the father of a player like Clay does, okay? Clay's the one in my era. Clay Matthews had a great career. Me, not so much. So I tried to stay away from the possible comparisons when the sons are talking.
Yeah, because the comparison to me and Clay Matthews, the son, are really all that favorable for me. Between accomplishments and just sheer looks. This is one to watch on the YouTube. The guy looks like he's got a few snaps left in him. Like if I'm someone and I need a linebacker to come through, or at this pace, a coach, because linebackers all the rage right now. And we will get to some sound from coaches today who got to the podium yesterday to address some of what's gone on over the last few days between Mike McCarthy keeping his job, Mike Tomlin finally calming down enough to sit at the podium and address his future in Pittsburgh. But Dad, we've got it upon us here, the divisional round. And I remember our former buddy Trey Wingo at ESPN, our former coworker, I should say, who always talked about how the divisional round might actually be the best weekend of football in the NFL because wild card weekend, we saw you can get a few duds sometimes. We only had one score game on Super Wild Card weekend last weekend. The divisional round tends to be that sweet spot of really good football and still enough in bulk. We got 4 games spread out where you can enjoy all of them. And even though the spreads on a couple of these are pretty wide, and we'll get to all of them and we'll get to preview all of them, there are a lot of games this weekend with intrigue about which way they can go because of how compelling so many of the individuals are on the field.
Yeah, I mean, the number and the spread is one thing for the gamblers out there, but the actual game and how it's going to be played at this point, because for those number 1 seeds, Baltimore and San Francisco, we always talk about the rust versus rest, especially if, the guys who rested in week 18 as well, you're talking about a 19-day layoff for those guys who didn't play. So that's a little more time to rest. And as I've always said, you can spin it any way you want. If you got all that rest, you say the rest is going to be great. If you didn't get any rest, you're going to say, that's cool, we're still rolling, we're going to go with momentum. So it doesn't really matter. You talk yourself into anything you want.
You can, but I think and we'll start off with Baltimore and Houston as the first game to kind of look at in that regard, Dad. As we get ready for this is one of the 9.5-point spreads. So currently on DraftKings Sportsbook, the Baltimore Ravens are 9.5-point favorites over C.J. Stroud's Texans, and the 49ers are 9.5-point favorites over the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. But for the rest versus rust component, Dad, for Baltimore, this has netted them potentially a very interesting development because Adam Schefter tweeted yesterday that Mark Andrews back and potentially able to play after missing the most of the end of the season in a time where we saw Isaiah Likely, Patrick Ricard, and the rest of that group fill in admirably as the Baltimore pass defense really started to find its footing. So, Dad, this is one of those examples. I mean, how much would you expect from a guy like Mark Andrews coming back from injury in a game like this?
So remember, he got hurt November 16th against Cincinnati on what is going to be highly discussed by the competition committee in the offseason, that hip drop tackle that Logan Wilson from Cincinnati did on him. And a lot of people were talking about Logan Wilson being a dirty player. Mark Andrews said, dude was just trying to get me down. He has no ill will. Whatever they're going to do with the play, they're going to do with the play. And I have a feeling they may outlaw it because there is plenty of of sample size of injuries with that play. So we'll see. So that's what he's coming back from. And you knew it when you saw it during that game that he was hurt. He knew it obviously right away. So, coming back from that, Mike, he obviously has been working out for a while. When you go on IR, you get that 21-day window to come back. He had a full week of practice this week. So, I mean, what an added, but they have two added bonuses, quite honestly. One won't get talked about much. Mark Andrews will and deserves to. Isaiah Likely, as you mentioned, stepped in and did a great job for Baltimore. But getting Andrews back, I mean, will be huge. And listen, if he can step on that field, I'd imagine he's going to do some damage. I was surprised last week when Sam Laporta, with the knee sprain, was able to play, and gut it out. Andrews has had a lot of time to heal this injury. So I would expect him to, again, it doesn't have to be 10 catches for 120 yards. Get some big catches in third down situations or in red zone situations like that. That he can definitely do. If he can step out on that field, he can contribute that way. The other one to me, Mike, is Dalvin Cook. Remember Dalvin Cook, who said when he went to the Jets, wow, here we go, man. Me and Breece Hall, we're going to be this unbelievable 1-2 punch. Didn't work out that way. Now his quote before this game is basically, I'm not sure what my workload's going to be. He kind of got humbled there a little bit to what it's going to be. But the guy can run. We know Lamar Jackson led the way in rushing. Gus Edwards was after that. Dalvin Cook can catch the ball out of the backfield. So as I'll repeat about Andrews, I don't expect 20 carries and 120 yards for Dalvin Cook. But, a run here or there or a catch here or there in an important situation, he can do. So they have a couple of guys, and we talking about attrition. When we're going to get to the Buffalo game, about two big-time names they've had out for a while already on defense. They got 4 more hurt against Pittsburgh last week, and we still have to wait and see what's happening there. Baltimore was able to get healthy with Andrews and bring in another player in Dalvin Cook that can help.
And on defense, Kyle Hamilton, who had dealt with a knee injury down the end of the season, now getting a couple of weeks where he got to sit on the shelf and looks like he'll be ready to go, was an All-Pro this year. They had him and they had Roquan Smith as first-team All-Pros this season on Baltimore's defense. It was the first time Baltimore had an All-Pro at linebacker and safety since Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. No pressure on that one, fellas.
No.
But, Dad, that's kind of emblematic of how much pressure is on Baltimore in this game. We've talked about Lamar Jackson and his playoff history here. There were 2 stats from NFL research that are insane to me that paint a picture of what rarefied air this Baltimore Ravens team is in and how crushing a loss would be given the people that are their peers right now. The Baltimore Ravens are one of only 3 teams in the Super Bowl era to average 25 or more points per game while leading the league in rushing offense and scoring defense. The other 2 are the 85 Bears and the 72 Dolphins. Two of the most synonymous teams in NFL history. And then the other one is the Baltimore Ravens are one of 2 teams in NFL history to have a 100-plus point differential against playoff teams. The other team was the 2007 Patriots. So these are the teams that Baltimore, coming off this regular season, are staring eye to eye to. These are the best Baltimore Ravens teams that Lamar Jackson has had during his time here, and yet his playoff history, with only 1 win to show for it so far, looms large against a team led by C.J. Stroud that seems like it's got some of the parts to play spoiler.
Yeah, the expectations are high because we've seen the Baltimore Ravens without Lamar Jackson in the playoffs and lose on that, the big one last year, and I covered that game against Cincinnati, the fumble at the goal line and the 99-yard fumble return for Cincinnati. And we've seen them lose with Lamar in the playoffs. But this is the best offense he's had to play with weapons, with Todd Monken at the OC and the players that they brought in. So that they're sitting in the best position right now. So this would be highly, highly disappointing if they weren't able to close it out. But this is how it works, man. It's how it works sometimes. Sometimes what looks like the best team or the most complete team doesn't win. So we'll see. And another injury for them on defense, but I don't think is going to be hurt. When you ever have a starter out, Marlon Humphrey is out, the cornerback, with a calf. But the difference here, Mike, is you didn't lose him a week before. Marlon Humphrey,
Sure.
and there's a difference, and you know this. Marlon Humphrey missed 8 games this year. So the guy taking over for him, Ronald Darby, has started like 7 times this season. So you're putting somebody in who has starts. So it shouldn't be that much of an effect for a team that, you're right. I mean, they're going to be looking to hit the ground running. They're going to properly respect Houston. There's no doubt. John Harbaugh is one of the most respected coaches, one of the best head coaches in the NFL. And you got, obviously, veterans on that team are going to say, listen, if a team gets this far, they deserved it, what they did. And the Houston Texans did. While it's a surprise, we all think they're there earlier than they should be, kind of like Green Bay, which we'll get to. They're still there. And they're producing. They're producing at an incredible level right now. So I'm with you. Last week's games, 5 of the 6 were bad games. We got a shot to have 4 good ones here, even though the spread might say something else.
Yeah, I think Baltimore wins this game. Like, that's firmly my pick in this game.
Yes.
I think what it comes down to is the Houston Texans defense and D'Amico Ryans, the job he's helped do with that unit last week, what they were able to do against the Cleveland Browns. Can they replicate that against a better rushing offense? The Houston Texans have been a really good rush defense for the vast majority of the season, but they've really struggled against play action pass. Baltimore runs as much play action pass and as well as anybody, and the difference is Houston was able to sort of paper over their deficiencies on that end because they could allocate resources back, because the Browns had been robbed of their best pitch in the rushing attack because of the Nick Chubb injury and all the offensive line injuries here. This Baltimore Ravens unit, Lamar Jackson is one of the best rushing NFL rushing quarterbacks in history. He's led the Ravens in rushing yards for 5 straight seasons. And so you couple that with the overall rushing attack. Now Houston, who loves to sit back and too high, you got to kind of pick your poison on how you're going to go about this, knowing you've struggled to stop the pass for a lot of this season against this Baltimore Ravens unit. So I think that, and then the matchup on the other side, the only thing I worry about with Baltimore and their offense and defense really is what the tackle situations look like. It's been a tough year for Ronnie. There's no two ways about that. Injury has been tough on him coming back. And Will Anderson Jr. led all rookies with 22 quarterback hits this season. Those edge rushers we saw take over the game for the Texans last week. That's going to go a long way if Baltimore can stay on schedule and keep those guys out of bad spots.
And one of the big things always with me is how you deal with a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. I saw it up close and personal when I was playing in Philadelphia and we had Randall Cunningham. It's always keep contained. Don't let him out of the pocket. Don't let him do what he does. And it's way easier said than done because Lamar Jackson has been somebody who is playing with some of the greatest athletes in the world, and he makes them look silly at times, right? I mean, it's stupid, his athletic ability and how good he is compared to others up at this level. So that's always a trick because a lot of times you got to find a balance of a disciplined pass rush, which negates lanes for a quarterback to run, and saying too disciplined of a pass rush to not let your guys go, right? Not let them kind of do their thing. So I can compare it to guys who we had on my team, a Reggie White and a Clyde Simmons, a Jerome Brown. When we played quarterbacks that could move, a John Elway, a Steve Young, those types of guys. It was never, hey, make sure you stay in your rush lane. It was, man, if you're one of our great rushers, you still do your thing. It may be good and it may be bad. Try and keep them in the pocket, but still we want you to do your thing. The Texans have 46 sacks on the year, so can they get to him? But more importantly, forgetting even the sacks, can you contain him and stop him from getting out of the pocket, forgetting even the run, before he even thinks about running, out of the pocket to pass because of the weapons that he has downfield. So the threat when he gets out of the pocket, it's almost like whoever's playing against them, their fans just go, uh-oh, what bad is going to happen here when he gets out of the pocket?
I do think the game breaker for Lamar this year, too, because going all the way back to watching them play the Rams earlier this season, really the only team to keep it close with them down the stretch of the year, Lamar Jackson's ability to manipulate inside the pocket also has been the level up this year. Like if I'm looking at a place where Todd Monken has really helped overall, it's Lamar Jackson as a guy who's constantly keeping his eyes downfield now, who's using that threat of escape to move guys around in the pocket and staying so calm under pressure in those situations. I think it's completely changed the math for that team, and it's been really exciting to watch for them. And Dad, mobile quarterbacks, I mean, CJ Stroud, certainly no slouch on the other side. The job that he's done buying time behind that Texans offensive line so that him and Nico Collins, really the remnants of this receiver group that's available to him in this game, he's gone a long way for them. I think on that side too, Dad, we saw down the stretch of the season, Devin Singletary and this Houston rushing attack towards the end of the season were a lot more productive than they were early on. And that's really, if you're the Texans, that's the secret sauce if you're trying to go up against this Baltimore defense and have any success, because we know about all the sim pressures, the parts they want to move around, all of the guys that they can attack you with on that defense, with Clowney having a career year sack-wise, Justin Madubuike leading the team in sacks at D-tackle, what Kyle Hamilton affords you. If you can go straight down State Street on them the way the Rams did way back when, you've got a decent chance, but that's been a tall order and inconsistent at best for the Texans this season.
I love this Baltimore defense, and I love the way they play. I love the amount of people at the line at times on who's coming. And as you know, as a former O-lineman, it's about confusing the O-line, because you can end up bringing 4, but you got a free rusher because you've confused the offensive line. Remember, these two teams played in week 1. It was C.J. Stroud's first game. So throw that out. Throw that out. It means nothing. Stroud threw for 242. He had to throw the ball 44 times. No touchdowns, no interceptions. He was sacked 5 times. The first 2 games, he was sacked 11 times. And then they went 3 games where he wasn't sacked at all and didn't get really bad sacked again until almost the end of November. We went through a 3-game string of 4, 5, and 4 sacks. Other than that, he's been pretty good in that line. They have grown together. And I think that's been a big thing. But Baltimore, again, with that defense, Baltimore coming in with 60 sacks. So, I mean, C.J. Stroud, who, one of the most impressive things to me, and I love this word a lot for quarterbacks, who's shown unbelievable poise in the pocket of not letting things get to him. But this Baltimore defense can absolutely overwhelm you.
Yeah, I think, and it's so fun to see Baltimore. We had this happen a couple of times this year where you'd see a team play the Browns and then the Ravens one after the other and watch how different the side-by-side comparison is. The Browns defense, because of the Myles Garrett injury and some other stuff, kind of slowed down towards the end of the season, but it's a lot more different where it's a little bit more straightforward, and especially with Myles Garrett, that battle on the edge. Laramie Tunsil acquitted himself quite well. Baltimore's like trying to hit smoke because they do move so much, because they do afford you so many different looks and so many different machinations of how they can come, that it makes it really interesting. That's why, like, the biggest misnomer stat to me in this game, Dad, was that both Baltimore and Houston were bottom 5 in blitz rate in the NFL this season. And with Houston, you can kind of see that, but with Baltimore, because a lot of these looks end up having only 4 guys rush, but they're 4 guys from odd angles. They're 4 guys from different levels. They're coming from places that you don't necessarily expect. It gives you the best of both worlds, which is the secret sauce of the whole idea. But it does create this thing where, CJ Stroud's been really good when he hasn't been blitzed. The problem is Baltimore is kind of getting to have their cake and eat it too.
So in one of the more non-sexy conversations, but still worth having because you were an offensive lineman, what's the issue? So when people are watching and they see Baltimore all over the place. I remember my buddy and our buddy, Bill Curry, would call a defense at times like that a minnow bucket defense, because they're moving around, and a minnow bucket meaning if you stick your hand in a minnow bucket as bait, the minnows fly all over the place. This at times looks like chaos with the amount of guys at the line. How is the O-line supposed to handle this?
Well, they're supposed to handle it by really being better on early downs, because if you get here, the problem is, the phrase, what you see is what you get. With Baltimore, what you see is rarely going to be what you get. Trying to predict where this blitz or where this pressure is going to come from is about trying to get you to declare one way and then having everybody come from the spots that you vacated there. So it's a tremendous challenge for everybody involved in the protection plan, for CJ Stroud and company to try and identify where it's coming from. It's part of the reason why I think the Baltimore Ravens win this game, and CJ Stroud and what's been a phenomenal rookie rookie season finally come to an end. We'll get to every game coming up in the divisional round as we go along on this show. Do not worry.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Cowboys faithful were left shaken once again when it was announced that Jerry Jones would not be making a coaching change. Mike McCarthy will be back next season. And he was asked, Mike McCarthy, what his message was for the legions of unhappy Cowboys fans.
And they should be frustrated. We're extremely disappointed. Disappointed for them, disappointed in our performance. But my message would be this: we have established a championship program. It's just not the world championship yet. We know how to win. We know how to train to win. We have the right people, but we have not crossed the threshold of winning playoff games. And it's extremely disappointing to be sitting here talking about it. But I know how to win, and we will get over that threshold. I have total confidence in it, and that's why I'm standing here today.
He knows how to win. He hasn't done it, but he knows how. He hasn't done it in the postseason, to be clear.
In the postseason, yeah.
Yeah, in the postseason, and really in the postseason since he got here. And for a lot of people, Dad, that's going to struggle to help him beat the charges about how much Aaron Rodgers influenced so much of his postseason success while he was in Green Bay. Because the one thing that I think also shouldn't get lost in this is that this is also a conversation about Dak Prescott when you talk about what they're able to do in the postseason, because I think we've all established that while Dak Prescott was a guy who started his career in a way that seemed unlikely because of when he was drafted, he went on to such early success, he unseated Tony Romo, and then he finally got a payday long after most of us thought he was due that. Where we've settled is Dak Prescott is one tier removed from the elite quarterbacks in this league. He's a very good quarterback. He's a guy who played MVP caliber football this season, but Mike McCarthy does not have a future Hall of Famer under center for him the way he did in Green Bay to help win these games, and we saw some of the strain of that.
Yeah, listen, Dak Prescott even admitted he played like garbage in the game against Tampa Bay. A lot of guys on that team, and got to be a lot of mirror looking there. So, you know, everybody's still gnashing their teeth at the fact that McCarthy is back. And I love how Jesse put it, the legion of fans. Yes, there are a lot are disappointed in this, but you know what? Here we are. This is what it is. He's back. So now what happens? So I'm moving past the. I'm sure everybody was losing their mind. I always love to see people keep their jobs, and let's see what happens. Here, they're going to have a different D coordinator, I'm sure. Dan Quinn interviewing everywhere, probably going to be gone. Will they hire from within? Will they go outside where the scheme will change some? Obviously, you want the scheme to favor a guy like Micah Parsons, who probably can play in any scheme. And then you have to, okay, so we know they need help, right? They obviously, your team changes every year. So the biggest question now to them, Mike, that's one of them, is the D coordinator. The other is, what do you do with Dak Prescott? We just talked about him. You have to extend him, right? He's in the last year of his contract. He has a no-trade clause in his contract, and he has a clause that they're not allowed to hit him with the franchise tag. So, I mean, he's free and clear after this year, but he's $59 million against the cap. $59 million against the cap. Already the projected cap and their rollover and stuff I will not break down and get into because A, I don't understand it all, and B, nobody cares who's listening or watching, is they're projected to be about $21 million over the cap. And if they extend him, they can wipe that out right away. So it's $59 million cap hit now. So extend them. If you cut them, the dead cap is close to $70 million, I think, which you could spread over 2 years. I think it's in that area there, maybe a little bit less. So they're going to have to extend him, right? I mean, because you have CeeDee Lamb playing on his fifth-year option coming up this year at about $18 million. And, oh, by the way, Micah Parsons will be the highest-paid defensive player in the league. And he's eligible for that this offseason. Yeah. So they have some money to spend and move around. So and Dak has all the leverage in the world here, right? All the leverage in the world.
He should. It's why I'm surprised it's gotten to this point and still hadn't been addressed, because this was the looming question. And Dak going out and playing as well as he did during the regular season, I'm sure helps his cause. The postseason then levels that off some. But yeah, I think you're forced to, Dad. And a lot of this, again, goes back to Jerry Jones is old and really wants to win, which means you're not going to get, I think, a dramatic retooling of this team. There's not going to be a massive overhaul because he can't afford to take a step back. I think part of it, and the reason there was this loyalty to Mike McCarthy, is he knows he's getting them into the dance every year, and they just got to hit it right and make a run, because if Jerry wants to win during his remaining years, it's not going to be after they tank and get some young player. It's not going to be after a massive overhaul of the parts. I don't know if they can afford, because of the way he's viewing this, to do the kind of overhauls that we've seen from, at least not at this juncture, because they've already done some of it in certain areas with some of the youth they've infused into this roster. But beyond that, this is a guy dealing with a different timeline. And so you're going to watch this team try and deal and win around the margins because of the desperation there.
Yeah, agreed that it's not going to be a big retooling. They're going to have to extend Dak Prescott. So we will see. So next is the moves going forward. And Jesse, is it true that Mike Tomlin had a press conference where he actually stayed in front of the microphone?
Yeah, he actually did. After he walked out of that one the other day, they started asking questions about his contract, and we all got the hysterical visual of him just being like, he just walked off. He's back in front of the microphones to address the situation where he stuck around and talked about it.
In a little better mood today, man. Anybody got any contract questions? I'll say this. I certainly could have handled that situation better than I did, but I'll also say this. I just believe there's a time and place for everything, and post-game press conferences are probably not the place to address contract issues and things of that nature. It's just a very individual thing, and on game day, I doubt any of us are in that mindset. Certainly I am not. Yes, I expect to be back, and I would imagine that those contract things are going to run their course, man. Art and I have a really good, transparent relationship. We communicate continually, often. I don't imagine it's going to be an issue, and I imagine it's going to get done in a timely manner at the appropriate time.
I mean, fair enough. fair enough. Post-game presser, probably not the moment to bring that one out. But I appreciate him saying, he's like, yeah, probably could have handled that better. I thought he handled it pretty well just walking off, to be honest.
I was surprised just because Mike Tomlin, one of the hallmarks of his career is he is always so in control at the podium. And that was one of the only times I've seen him not in control of that situation, although you could argue he was. Dad, I thought the most interesting thing from Tomlin's statements wasn't that he was going to be there, that the actual Steelers might extend him, honestly, going forward, which is the most Pittsburgh Steelers franchise thing also. But he did say the starting quarterback for next season is already in-house. And I think if I'm a Steelers fan, that might be the most concerning part. Where are you at on continuing to give Kenny Pickett another look under center in Pittsburgh?
I mean, this is Justin Fields, right, in Chicago as well.
Yeah.
So let me first say I disagree with him. That question can be asked. You may not like it,
100%.
But the best thing to do is, I'm with you. I was surprised he did that because that guy usually has an answer for everything. And he's been in this long enough. He's got to know, just like players. You know what another personal thing is? Retiring. Jason Kelce got asked after the game. Players get asked who are later in their career, is this your last game? It's a personal question. It's right after a last loss that knocks you out. They're fair questions. Anybody that says they're not, I'm sorry. They're fair questions, and you can answer it very simply. This isn't the time for me to discuss this. We just lost. There'll be a time, I don't know when that is, and you're done. You're done with it. All right, somebody might follow up once, you give the answer, and you move on. But you're also obviously stung from the loss and the fact that your season ended, and it got to him, and he walked off. So I just wanted to say that first. Kenny Pickett, 2 years in the league, 13 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. They're bringing in a new coordinator, so the guys that were splitting it, Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan, they will not be the offensive coordinator. So who comes in? Yeah, I'm a little surprised, Mike, that they're not going to move on and start new there and just see it's not really working. Maybe the thought is, hey, a new old coordinator can get more out of them. We'll wait and see, but I guarantee you, they're bringing in a veteran to compete.
Yeah, well, and listen, at this point, it might be the guy that helped lead them through part of the end of the postseason in Mason Rudolph and what he did for them down the stretch. But this coordinator hire, about as important as any for any coach this offseason after the Matt Canada experience that lasted far too long.
GoJo and Golic. It is time for Cash It or Trash It, presented by DraftKings Fantasy Sports. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code GoJo, because life's more fun when you're in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. So, fellas, in this edition of Cash It or Trash It, we're going to look at the Bucs-Lions matchup. Detroit 6.5-point home favorites against the Bucs. Since this is Cash It or Trash It, though, we thought we'd start with a little trash talk here. So, ahead of this matchup, Lions defensive back C.J. Gardner-Johnson said, if you give that Tampa group a good quarterback, that's a great group. Evans, Godwin, Russell Gage, that's a great group. I played against them for real. And in his press conference yesterday, Baker Mayfield was asked about those comments.
I don't think he's really watched film, because you mentioned Russell Gage. You know, we love Russell, but Russell hasn't played a snap all year for us. He must be going off the preseason stuff that the media was talking about, but he didn't play our first game, so I'm excited to see him. I think he's a really good player. He has been for a while, and he's been an impactful guy on every team he's been on. So he's a good player, but yeah, he's got to do a little bit more film study.
The best type of trash talk is that it's kind of subtle. Like, you don't, he said it so even keeled. It's like, is he insulting him, or is he just trying to help a brother out? We don't know. So, are you guys cashing or trashing the Bucs' chances of pulling the upset while getting 6.5? What do we think?
So, I will. If you're asking for my pick for this game, I'm going to trash it. I do think the Lions are able to win this one, and I think they're able to win it by a touchdown, but Dad, it really, to me, is going to be less of what Baker and that Bucs offense can do. They're certainly a part of that. To me, this game's all about, can you pressure Jared Goff? And we know how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers want to do it. We saw how unprepared the Philadelphia Eagles offense was for the blitz last week, how much it rattled Jalen Hurts. For Jared Goff and for the Lions offense, it's been a similar thing. No quarterback in the NFL has a bigger fall off in passer rating when they're under pressure versus in a clean pocket than Jared Goff does, for all the obvious reasons. We saw him he got his foot tapped last week and fell over like he was a broom falling down in the closet. So he is not the most fleet of foot ever.
No.
And because of that, he's going to suffer in some of those situations. But as you know and have seen covering this team some down the stretch, once Frank Ragnow got back in there at center, the game kind of changed when that offensive line solidified. So I do think they're in good position to stop that.
Yeah, I do as well. The one thing that Tampa Bay has that they're able to do is the amount of players that have, a decent amount of sacks. If you sit there and look overall at them, I think, where are they at? They're at 48 sacks, but they have 7 players with 4 or more sacks. So you're not just counting on that one guy to get pressure, right? You have a few guys that can get pressure. So I think that's a positive on the side for Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay does not give up a lot of yards on the ground at all. Now, they don't run the ball at all well, but they don't give up a lot of yards on the ground. And you got 2 runners in Montgomery and Gibbs. And by the way, when they played in Week 5, Gibbs didn't play in that one, and Montgomery only had 6 carries. I think he got nicked in that game. So they really, Amon-Ra St. Brown was the man. He had 12 catches for 100 and some yards. I think next was Laporta with like 4 catches. But again, tough to really go on earlier in the year, especially, Week 5 is pretty early. But I'm with you. Jared Goff, this is, we sat there and talked about Houston versus Lamar in Baltimore, and just how this game has changed over the last 2 years of quarterbacks that can move. And, you have one in Jared Goff, like you had one last week with Joe Flacco, where, he's a statue in that pocket. Goff is kind of the same thing. He can move better than Flacco, but he's not a real threat to hurt you there. So this falls, again, on this rush by Tampa Bay, as I mentioned, kind of an even rush that they have. And the fact, too, if you can, and it's not just the first down, it's where do you have them on the sticks? They're so good against the run. So what does Detroit do? Does Detroit try and run on that first down? Last week, Green Bay and the Cowboys, Green Bay was throwing the little short passes on first down, and we get 2nd and 5, which is gold for an offense and horrid for a defense. So what position? To me, 2nd down is almost the biggest down of what position is each other in. Do you have them in 2nd and 7+, or is the offense 2nd and less than 6? I mean, that dictates a whole lot of what you're going to do.
I do think it's worth noting with this Lions team, though, they've been remarkably resilient in situations like that this season. They've won all 3 games with their 3 lowest rushing totals this season, including against Tampa Bay in Week 6. They have 40 yards on the ground in that game against the Buccaneers. They had 70 in Week 18 against Minnesota, and then last week against the Rams in a game they won. Only 79 rushing yards in that game. But because, Dad, I think twofold. One, Jahmyr Gibbs has come online in so many ways. All that stuff we heard at the beginning of the season about how Ben Johnson was going to use him in ways previously untold to mankind. While they didn't necessarily invent the reel, they threw him swing passes and screens and all the normal stuff we see. He's done them really well. He breaks tackles really well. So he's been great in that regard. And then you mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot. In terms of defense, pass defense, we know the Bucs have really struggled this year, but they give up the second most yards total on the season to the slot and the second most yards per target on the season to the slot. Amon-Ra St. Brown this season was 3rd in yards from the slot with 608. So they've got the recent history. That is one thing I think you can pluck from the last game. And then opposite him, Dad, and I think one thing we probably knew less early in the season, Sam Laporta, once you saw him back healthy last week, the matchup of him and Antoine Winfield Jr., a couple of all-pros and a couple of young studs in this league getting to go head-to-head, that's going to be the other counter is he's not alone in the middle of the field, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've got a really capable threat and an offense that we highlighted talking to Jason Kabinda a couple days ago, does a really good job of using its big skill personnel and personnel in general to create favorable matchups in the middle of the field where Jared Goff is far and away the most comfortable. It's the total Jared Goff hack is play action pass shots over the middle. And so they're great at manufacturing that in an area of the field where Tampa Bay struggles to defend.
So in doing Detroit a few weeks ago, I talked about their depth on offense, right? 2 running backs. And oh, by the way, they're not just running backs. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie, has in regular season 52 catches out of the backfield. And then you talk about St. Brown. And then you talk about Laporta, who's the 3rd wide receiver that's going to help out here as well. We'll wait and see who steps up. That's always one of those things that we talk about is we know who the stars are, who's the next guy, who's maybe that unsung guy that's going to step up. So they have depth on offense, which I think is one of the more impressive things for them. You know, what can they do on defense against Baker Mayfield? Listen, Baker Mayfield is a chicken wire and duct tape guy, right? I mean, he's just going to run into things. He's going to run into poles. He's going to dislocate things. He's going to look messy doing it, but he's getting the job done. He threw for the most yards this year in his career. He threw for the most touchdowns this year in his career. So he's finding a way to get it done. Is he the most elite guy around? No, but man, is he a great teammate. You still kind of cross your fingers and hope a little bit when he starts breaking the pocket because it can be a big play, whether him throwing or running the ball. I love watching him run the ball because he's going to take a shot. He is rarely running out of bounds on his own. God forbid the sticks are right in front of him of what he's going to do to try and get to those sticks. So he is such a fun wild card to watch in the playoffs because he's just not of the what a normal quarterback would do in a situation. He kind of breaks that mold and is fun to watch with that.
Yeah, he kind of plays like he's Josh Allen, but has none of the physical attributes that Josh Allen has going out there.
We're being nice. Yes, we're trying to be nice to the guy, too. You know, we don't want to rip the guy because he's playing incredibly well. He really is.
He is. I think one of the keys and the things I'm most excited to see again in this game is the Tampa Bay offensive line, I think a little bit stronger on the edges than maybe they are on the interior. And the Lions got such an added bonus getting Aleem McNeil back week 18 and then going into last week's playoff matchup. Didn't show up in the box score with a ton of stuff, but watch down in and down out what 54 does to help out a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, who's been the story for them on the edge. Aleem McNeil showed up all over the place. He gets on edges for guys on the inside. And so for Rob Hainsey, our buddy in the interior there in Tampa Bay, and the rest of those dudes, they got a tall order in all the ways that he can help hurt you in that spot. So it's going to be fascinating to watch that matchup. I do think the Lions get the win in this game. I do think the Lions actually cover in this game. And Detroit has to wait a lot less time to go to their second postseason win in 32 years after getting their first a week ago.
and Golic. The Chiefs-Bills game on Sunday is filled with intrigue. Storylines abundant. We're going to talk 5,000 times about how it's Patrick Mahomes' first road playoff game. But while addressing the media on Wednesday, Chiefs star defensive tackle Chris Jones, he was talking about the challenges that facing Josh Allen is going to present specifically to this Kansas City defense.
He's a warrior. I mean, you look at the plays he made last time we was playing him. He was going out of bounds. He ended up throwing a 40-yarder, running out of bounds off his back leg. I mean, he's tough to bring down. A couple times we had him wrapped up. He still got rid of the ball. Just his competitiveness within his game. I mean, he can make any throw. He has a big arm. And then he also has talent around him. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Cook, who became a vital part in their offense later on here. I think they've been playing really, really well together.
Okay, guys, so we got the Chiefs' second-ranked defense, Bills' fourth-ranked offense. How do we feel going into this one?
Spoiled. Getting this matchup as many times as we've gotten it. And I know you talked about we're going to hit the, Chiefs road playoff game stat till we're blue in the face. We're also going to reference the 2021 playoff game till we're blue in the face because it might be one of the greatest modern playoff games that we've ever seen. It's the only game in NFL history with 3 go-ahead touchdowns in the final 2 minutes. And it was the only game in Super Bowl era where both quarterbacks had over 300 yards passing, 3 passing touchdowns and no interceptions, and over 60 rush yards each. So we saw these two go absolutely Super Saiyan in the last game, and it's going to be interesting now because on Buffalo's, I think in both instances, that's exactly what both teams are going to need if somebody's going to win this game. Josh has been doing it much more so as a runner this postseason, which is usually his way of going. But for Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense here, I'm fascinated to see if they are truly as stable now as they looked in the wild card round, or if my concern is that was more of a product of a bad Miami team that was too beat up and in a situation that took them completely out of their game.
Well, I mean, also, Miami was beat up in that game, without a doubt, but now Buffalo is beat up as well, right? I mean, they've had guys that have already been out for the year, that they've had to be without. Tre'Davious White's been out for a while, Matt Milano. But they had 4 regulars hurt against the Steelers, including a couple of starters, the nickelback Tron Johnson and cornerback Christian Benford. So we don't know about those guys yet, or if nothing else, they're going to be playing nicked up a little bit. So that's big when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes and you're kind of a little less than what you are. And most teams are, but to get nicked up right the week before, as I mentioned earlier with Baltimore, if you got a player out in Humphrey, he's already missed 8 games. You've had his replacement already starting here. Here you have guys that got hurt last week and others need to step up right away. So that makes it a little more difficult here. But I do like, and so one thing I always talked about, the last game of the season, when there's a lot riding the last game of the season, they're normally divisional games. And the one thing you talk about a lot in divisional games is you don't have to game plan a ton, right? Because you know them. You know each other. It's more, it's always about one-on-one battles, but you know the person you're playing against. You know the style that they do. You may pull something out of your hat here and there. These two obviously are not divisional opponents, but, Chris Jones said there's no secrets with these two teams. Ed Oliver for Buffalo said it's just like playing a divisional opponent. And he's right. They've played so much, they know each other so well that it is like a divisional opponent. So there's going to be nothing sneaky here, right? And as I said, though, maybe a play you work up just for this game. But for the most part, it is just these two teams battling. What was it, 20-17 on a field goal with a little less than a minute to go, like 4 or 5 weeks ago when Buffalo beat Kansas City. So this one was, as the other teams we talked about in the playoffs playing this week they played earlier in the season. This one was just a few weeks ago, and it was a close game. So everybody's expecting this to be the best game. It's the last game of the weekend. Please don't let us down. Please let it be. And remember, the 2 biggest differences in this game are, 1, Kansas City's on the road and traveling for the first time, and 2, because of the game in 21 that went to overtime, the overtime rule has changed. So if the teams are tied, both these quarterbacks quarterbacks will see the field, unless, of course, there's a defensive touchdown on the first drive. Then the game is over. But so those are the two biggest differences of these two teams facing each other now.
Yeah, it is definitely a game and a magnitude of it that has absolutely changed the NFL already. So fingers crossed, like you said, they don't lay an egg this time around, because there's a ton of pressure on them to do so there. Dad, which way do you lean in this game? I've found myself wanting to pick Buffalo because, as we've seen in the postseason, the path of least resistance can make the game really difficult. And for the Buffalo Bills since Week 10, they lead the NFL with 35.3 carries per game. They lead the NFL with 157.6 rush yards per game against a Kansas City defense that's great in a lot of areas, but has been at best league average against the run for a lot of this season. Now, we know no one can make a very specific game plan like Spags, and I'm sure they're going to have some interesting wrinkle to try and address the biggest elephant in the room, pun fully intended, in Josh Allen, who runs like a large elephant through the middle of these defenses. But Buffalo's secret sauce during this entire stretch where they've had to play desperation postseason ball has been that they've been able to go hammer and nail with an offensive line that's had incredible continuity, with James Cook, who affords you ability as a runner and a pass catcher, and Josh Allen, who's been willing to put his body on the line now because he knows, all right, we're win or go home football, so I don't have to put the governor on this thing anymore.
Yeah, the biggest thing to me, I think I'm leaning Buffalo in this game, Mike. And I think one of the biggest reasons why is last year, the Chiefs 71% of the time scored touchdowns in the red zone. This year, way down to 52%. So that's down lower part of the NFL. Last week in the playoff game, they got 6 times they were in the red zone. And 4 times 4 of those had to be field goals. They weren't getting into the end zone. Buffalo, because of Josh Allen, can get it in the end zone. Buffalo can either run it with Cook, can pass it, or Josh Allen can just barrel his big-ass way into the end zone, and they can finish it with touchdowns. So, and even Andy Reid said it. He said, we love Butker, our kicker, but we need to put the ball in the end zone. And that could be the difference to me. It wasn't just last week. It's all season long. They struggled getting it into the end zone. And let's be honest, one of the parts was Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce has not had a year he's normally had. And, they've had a lot of drops as well. They led the league in drops. Rashee Rice has come along incredibly well, but they still have had issues that people thought they could magically fix. It doesn't work that way. So I think that part of the game could be the difference, 7s instead of 3s, and I'm going to lean to Buffalo.
And you mentioned those two names and options. They're really the only ones in the Kansas City receiving game. Only Kelce and Rashee Rice, the only players on that team with over 50 catches and over 500 yards this season. Everybody else has been chasing that. We've seen the struggles that have come with it. The other big factor, and the thing that I think is the biggest swing from last week to this week, is Buffalo Bills being able to get pressure with just 4 up front. They're healthier on the edges with Von Miller, Leonard Floyd, A.J. Epinesa, Greg Rousseau. They can roll bodies through there. And, Dad, I read the stat before. This might be the most surprising stat that I saw and is kind of indicative of some of the struggles the Chiefs have had on the edges of their offensive line this year. They're healthy at left tackle now. They've got the depth back there with Wanye Morris back this week too. I mentioned Jared Goff has the biggest fall off in passer rating between being unpressured and pressured in the NFL this season. You know who's third on that list in terms of falls off in passer rating when they are pressured versus not pressured? Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes had the 3rd biggest drop-off in passer rating in those situations. And we saw this year anecdotally on the edges with Jawan Taylor and the snap count stuff that I think got in his head after a while, between the injuries to Donovan Smith on the other side and then Wanye Morris having to come in and him getting banged up. We've seen Patrick Mahomes under duress in a way we really hadn't seen since that Super Bowl against Tampa, with an offensive line that they spent a lot of time retooling. And I do think if Buffalo's going to win this game, it's going to be in large part because their edge rushers are going to be able to continue to do what a bunch of people have clearly been able to do for this season, which is get Patrick Mahomes off his game without having to blitz where he's normally been so deadly.
GoJo and Golic. It's Friday, but here on this show, we don't say TGIF. We say TGIAT. Thank God it's acrostic time. Good Lord. Here we are. And with every acrostic comes a good poem. Let's have at it, fellas. G is for the game that will have us all talking. O is for the player who will let his stats do the talking. Those don't rhyme. That's just the same word. L is for Lamar's place in the history books. I is for the stadium that will have the road team shook. C is for the dog that might just have its day. So let's get GoJo and Golic's takes on the games that are just 24 hours away.
Wow. Way to stick the landing. After we didn't rhyme.
I can confirm. We don't say TGIAT here. We should start doing that now, though.
We should.
We will.
And I like the idea. Shout out to our producer, Tom Glenn. Who, you know what? I mean, technically, talk and talk do rhyme because they're the same word.
No,
and
it's talking and talking, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it works. It works. Poems are hard.
It sounds.
They have a lot of different
I'm not
forms,
writing these.
functions.
I couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'm with you.
We are not going to throw stones from a glass house.
Nope.
We're going to snap our fingers.
Nope.
Appreciate it. And gets to talking the football. As we look ahead at this weekend, Dad, we've talked about some of the game action, but great storylines here. So starting off with the game of the week, we just mentioned it in the last segment. To me, it's easy. It's Bills Chiefs. Like, this is the one that has the two generational quarterbacks going head to head. It's got all the narrative juice of Sean McDermott's Buffalo Bills coming off the weird 9/11 motivational story from 2019 that has somehow coincided with them. They got the pit out there in Buffalo that fans are sacrificing bodies to. Taylor Swift's going to be at this game. It just, all of that coupled with this immense pressure on the Buffalo Bills to go out and finally get over the hump. They finally got the game at Orchard Park and don't have to go to Arrowhead in the postseason. All of this, to me, leads to an atmosphere that should be absolutely insane, one where weather's, thankfully, I don't think going to affect the outcome as much as we've seen in some of the recent games last weekend, and I think we get an absolute banger.
Yeah, I do as well. We're hoping, because that's the last one of the weekend, that it lives up. That one obviously is going to get the most hype. There's no doubt about that. So I'm going to go away from that, and I'm going to say the game I'm calling, Green Bay at San Francisco. What Green Bay has done leading to this point, Mike, has been absolutely amazing. With the youth that they have, I can't stress enough, it's the fourth youngest team in the playoffs at 25 and a half years old, the youngest team to win a playoff game, and they're doing it with rookie and second-year guys. It's crazy how well they're doing. They have 4 games where rookies accounted for more than 200 yards in receiving in the history of the Packers, and all 4 of those games were this year. I mean, the first and second year players, almost 4,000 scrimmage yards and 33 scrimmage touchdowns. I mean, they are playing great. Love is not turning the ball over. I'm really excited to see what they do against what everybody believes is the Goliath of the NFC with the 49ers, who have had a chance to rest. Get Eric Armstead back to help them against the run because they've been struggling against the run. So getting him back on that D-line, how will that help? Because Aaron Jones has gone 4 straight games over 100 yards for Green Bay, and how much that is helping Jordan Love with his play-action pass has been incredible. San Francisco, great at the statistically if you look at the year against the run, but as of late, not as good. Getting Armstead back is probably going to help that. But can Green Bay continue with the running game so the play action can go to the couple rookie wide receivers, the 2 rookie tight ends, the second-year guys in Watson and Dobbs? I've just been amazed by what this team has been able to do. They are flying high right now into San Francisco. I'm so looking forward to this one.
It's going to be a great one. We'll have the preview for that one coming up, too, and what could be the most impactful injury in that game as the San Francisco offense has an interesting challenge against Green Bay's defense that we can get to. But, Jesse, it's time to get to the O here in our acrostic. What do we got?
Yeah, so actually, after not having a 100-yard receiving game all regular season, Romeo Doubs, Packers wide receiver, had 6 catches for 151 yards in a touchdown in that upset win over Dallas. Those numbers were enough to make him the highest-graded wide receiver by PFF for the NFL's wild card game weekend. So, fellas, the question I want to know, who's someone that could step up this weekend, have a breakout game? What do we think?
So this is a little bit of a cop-out because he's already had his breakout moment, Dad, but I look at, and something that I think is interesting given the fact that Mark Andrews could be back for the Baltimore Ravens on the field this week, is what Isaiah Likely has been able to do for the Baltimore Ravens and the matchup he could have against some of those linebackers there. This season, among tight ends who qualify here, so minimum 25 targets, the best quarterback tight end combination in terms of passer rating was Lamar Jackson to Isaiah Likely. Lamar Jackson had a 142 passer rating when targeting Isaiah Likely. The second best combination, for what it's worth, was Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. So you can see the pattern that shows up here. But I think whether Mark Andrews is able to go or not, you're going to see a healthy dose of Isaiah Likely against this defense on the other side for Houston that's got, Derek Stingley Jr. on the outside, some dudes that can make you pay. I think Likely in that play action game that's so potent for the Baltimore Ravens against that pass defense that struggles with it in Houston would go a long way in their team's success, no matter who his counterpart in that tight end room is.
So you're saying Likely is likely to be the breakout player?
Extremely punny name that I don't think we've utilized properly enough as a general sports watching public, by the way.
Agreed. That's why I just tried one there. I threw up the trial balloon on that one. I'm going to go the Detroit-Tampa Bay game, Mike, and I'm going to go Josh Reynolds, a wide receiver for Detroit.
Yeah.
So he was 4th on the team in receptions behind St. Brown, behind Laporta. Those two were way out in front, and then Jahmyr Gibbs, and then it was Reynolds. But he did average over 15 yards a catch during the regular season. So then in this playoff game, Sam Laporta played. He's got that bad knee, but played anyway. Did have 3 catches, but for just 14 yards. I would imagine he'll be able to do a little more this week. Josh Reynolds stepped up and was the second leading receiver behind St. Brown. He had 5 catches. Again, averaged 16 yards per catch. So this guy isn't just, gaining a couple of yards. He's either catching short and yards after the catch or catching long. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. Again, I think Sam Laporta is going to be obviously a week healthier, but Reynolds may be a guy to turn to at times as well to get something done, and he does it in chunk yardage.
Yeah, he has been a really interesting revelation for that team. There's no doubt. So having him opposite all the main weapons that we've talked about there, Dad, we know it's your favorite thing in the postseason. Shaq calls them the others, the other guys that step up in these games. And I do think between him on that side, and then we talked about Aleem McNeil on the other side there defensively for them, they've got a couple of really interesting other guys that could have a chance to affect this game. But for everybody else, Dad, they're here for the big fellas. So why don't we get to the L and go legacy time? Lamar Jackson is 1-3 in the postseason in his career. We know early on that was a huge hang-up for him, even coming off his MVP season back in 29. We expect him to be coming off another MVP season by the time we kick off the Super Bowl. So is Lamar Jackson playing for more than just a playoff win this weekend? How important is this when we start to continue to build out Lamar Jackson and his legacy in this league?
Oh, it's huge because I think wrongly so, we put quarterbacks with Super Bowl wins. When there's offense, there's defense, there's special teams, we all of a sudden just put the Super Bowl wins or losses on the quarterback's shoulders. I know it's the most important position. I get it. So if we're doing that, hell yeah. This guy's going to be a 2-time MVP, when he's 15 years old? I mean, already twice considered the best in the league. And 1 win in the playoffs. And this year is the best team he's been on. So I without question, that's going to go down. Now, you don't have to win a Super Bowl to be considered one of the greats of all time. See Dan Marino for that, and others as well. But that's a name, that pops out of greats who have never won a championship in their sport. But again, that's how we're measured. That's how we're measured. So yes, we know he's a great player. We know he can be considered the best player in the league with the MVP awards. But what do you do then in the postseason when it matters? The Reggie Jackson, Mr. October. When all of a sudden the postseason hits, how do you perform? That's what people are going to remember about you. And it's only the upper echelon of the league that sits in that situation, right? And he's in it, considered, the best in the league at what he does. And what do you have to show for it when you get to the postseason?
You mentioned his youth. He would be the second youngest player and the youngest quarterback to win multiple MVPs in his career. He turned 27 the day after Baltimore's final regular season game. Only Jim Brown had more MVPs at a younger age at 22 years and 300 days. But, Dad, it was interesting hearing you talk about the way we perceive Lamar Jackson and thinking about what else went on this year in sports. It reminds you in certain ways, and this comparison is hilarious given the athletic ability of the two people I'm about to mention. It's very Nikola Jokic-esque, where we know we've got this great player who is accomplishing things at an all-time level. Lamar Jackson was top 5 in yards per attempt, touchdown and interception ratio, and passer rating this season. He went and added that element of the game, the element that we thought Greg Roman was robbing him of for so many years. He by all accounts, and this was a big year for just watching the ball because the stats didn't necessarily look like an MVP season when you propped him up against some of the other guys he was going up against. But Lamar Jackson's game has taken even that next step in that other level. The problem is now, because of that era you're in, and I mentioned Nikola Jokic because he was a guy that, because he stacked up multiple MVPs and was talked about in that way, got looked at sideways because their team hadn't gone past a certain sticking point in the postseason. Lamar Jackson would be the 10th quarterback to win multiple AP NFL MVPs. The other ones are Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Montana, Kurt Warner, and Steve Young. They're all guys that were made men when it came postseason time. Right. And so because, like Jokic, you get to this rarefied air of personal individual accomplishment, we start to look at you and just go, all right, well, this is the one thing you haven't given us. And it would be ironic if both of these, I think like Alanis Morris said ironic, if both Lamar Jackson and Nikola Jokic got over the hump in this same sports calendar year.
Yeah, I agree. So I think a lot is fairly or unfairly, because there are those that and I kind of lean that way. I think it's kind of ridiculous to put the Super Bowl wins and losses just on the quarterback. But that's what we do, and it's not going to end. So I'm not going to sit there and fight it. I'm just going to say, okay, if that's how we're going to judge things, then yeah, he's got some work to do there.
He certainly does, but this year he's got the arsenal around him, but he's also been that effective. We've all seen it. We're fortunate in the AFC to have this many quarterbacks that seem to affect the game on this high a level, which, Jesse, is a great lead as we continue on here in the Acrostic to Patrick Mahomes and his role in this entire proceeding.
Yeah, something nobody's been talking about. The fact that he's playing in his first road playoff game, he addressed it with the media.
Kind of just is what it is. Obviously, I've been lucky enough to play a lot of games at home at Arrowhead Stadium. Kind of just everything's felt that way. But now we get the great opportunity to go on the road, play in a hostile environment, one that I haven't been able to play with fans in the stands. And even though I know it's going to be hostile and there are going to be people talking trash and everything like that, I'm excited for it because, it's one of the best environments in football, and you want to do that when you grow up watching these games, is play in the best environments and see what it's like.
He can't wait to get put through a table in Buffalo.
Listen, if you drink every time someone brings up the fact that this is Mahomes' first road playoff win, you would be just drunk enough to attend a Bills Mafia tailgate. So that might actually be the perfect pregame going into this weekend. Dad, which team overall, because there's going to be a lot of talk about this, do you think actually has the best home field advantage going into this weekend? Who's that going to actually matter the most for at this point?
I'm going to say Baltimore. They're playing a dome team. Dome team's coming to the cold. It's snowing right as we speak in Baltimore right now. The high tomorrow is 24. The low is 16. So you're going to be in that range. And then if there's some wind, it could be colder than that. So I would say, and that's the biggest spread too. So it's not like I'm really going out on a limb, but I'm just looking at teams. One comes from a dome, the other is used to playing in this, and the field conditions that they're going to be playing in. So I would lean toward Baltimore as the best home field advantage.
And what you brought up there is kind of why I'm interested to see Mahomes bringing up that he hasn't played there with fans. And we know how it can sometimes change the mechanics of what you do on the road, right? Being able to use multiple cadences to try and get a look at what the defense does. All that stuff becomes harder on the road. And we know the Kansas City Chiefs have had issues at times with their tackles and guys on the edge. So the guys that would be trying to get a jump, all that stuff is a real effect. But Kansas City's used to playing in frigid temperatures. Kansas City's used to a very loud, raucous environment that they play their games in. And so none of that's going to be a shock to the system the way you describe with Baltimore. Dad, I'll go the low-hanging fruit since we saw it brought up in the press conference with Todd Bowles, where unfortunately a media member forgot that the Detroit Lions play inside a dome when they asked how they're preparing for that. And I'll say Detroit, though, given, one, the fact that they're a team that does play in a dome, so they've got that home field advantage. They want to get out there and move on that track, but just what the city of Detroit is going to do. We saw there was the added element of Matthew Stafford coming back last week. It was their first chance at a playoff win in the first time for 32 years, but I think being able to follow that up with another home game, that place is going to be ready to try and blow the lid off that and let the elements in to bother Todd Bowles' team.
By the way, there's no out of that, right? If you do something where you kind of get nailed on it, there's no trying to talk around it. For those that didn't see it, there was somebody asking Todd Bowles, how are you going to prepare for the conditions? I think she was saying it was supposed to be like 13 degrees. How are you preparing the team? And you could just see the look on Todd Bowles' face, like, how am I going to answer this without listen, I have been in like Bill Parcells' post game or press conference and not post, and just would cringe when I'd hear a question like that of how he would answer. Todd Bowles was basically very nice about it and just said, we do play indoors there. So he did say the only time we'll have to deal with the elements is the 20-second walk from the bus to the stadium. I mean, there's no around that one. You just got to throw your hands up and say, yep, blew that one.
Yeah, you got to wear that one. It made me think of the Step Brothers line. They're a trophy fish, so they're pretty big. What's this guy's deal? For ruining the story and possibly the evening. But shout out to Todd Bowles for being a very kind man in that instance. Yeah. Everybody messes up at certain times, and that one just happened to be a little more public because it's the playoffs and everything matters. Dad, let's get to the C. Can you believe it? The underdog that you think has the best chance of winning this weekend. I'm going to go a cop-out and say Kansas City. They're a 2.5-point dog in a game that we've mentioned is going to have some injury concerns for Buffalo in the second level in the middle on that defense. And so with Kansas City, picking against Kansas City is so scary to me in the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes owns beautiful real estate in my head, multiple properties because of what he's done in the postseason. So I'll say they've got the best chance of pulling this off in the final game of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm not going to go with that one. To me, that's a pick'em game. But I get it. There's a point difference there. So certainly your choice to do. I'm going to go again the game I'm calling. No, I'm not calling for Green Bay to win or San Fran to win. I'm not going to do that. When I'm calling the game, I have to stay unbiased here. But I know a lot of people are thinking, here's a 7 seed coming in to play the top seed in the NFC who got a week off, and looking to say Green Bay on the road. But Green Bay is playing so well, Mike. I think this game is going to be a lot closer than people think. I think it's going to be a really competitive game because, as I keep saying about this, you get a team in Green Bay that's playing well, and you ride when you're playing well. It's not like you're hit and miss. You've been consistently doing well toward the end of the season, and I'll continue to say the biggest thing is your first-year starting quarterback is not turning the ball over, which you can't do to San Fran and give them extra possessions on offense. So I think this game is going to be a very, very, very competitive game.
Boy, I say we got to clip this off for your partner, Ryan Radke, over at Westwood One. What a sell Dad is trying to do to get people to tune in and listen to your guys' game on Saturday afternoon here. The pressure, the drama, the stakes, the young quarterback in Jordan Love finding a way the ball out here. That's a really convincing sell, Dad. You got me fooled.
I tried. And if you want, you're watching it on TV, turn the sound down, turn our radio broadcast on, and, check it out. It's a good way to do it as well.
There you go. Available. You can check it out on NFL.com. It's got it listed underneath there. So coming up next, why don't we do that? It's the one game we haven't previewed. It is the game that you're getting ready to call. And so we can take a look and dive in. San Francisco, one of the teams that we haven't seen for a couple weeks. The 1 seed got the bye. A little refresher course as they get ready to host outside of the Buffalo Bills. You could argue the hottest team in football, given what we've seen both from them on the ground, but all eyes certainly going to be on the heir apparent to the throne that is the Green Bay Packers quarterback room as we do Packers and 49ers next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Kyle Shanahan's squad is going to try to avoid the Cowboys' fate, becoming the second upset victim this postseason to the Packers. So Shanahan spoke to the media and outlined what he and his squad are doing to prepare for Jordan Love and company.
I would say so before we got into the playoffs, just because we hadn't really studied Green Bay and watched them. Once we had those 10 days to kind of view a lot of people, then you realize that they had a good shot. I mean, didn't know who was going to win, but so it didn't surprise me what happened. Dallas is a good team, so just the way it started out was a little surprising. But once you watch the tape and you really get into Green Bay and you really think of their numbers and you really watch their players and how they're doing it, it doesn't surprise me at all now. And you got all this time, and everyone wants to talk about all this stuff that leads up to it, and there's a lot of stuff to think about, but it comes down to what you do in 3.5 hours. And if you got a little amount of time to prepare for that, a lot amount of time, if it's a team you've played for 3 times, a team you haven't played in 2 years, there's lots of things to think about and talk about. All we try to do is study the film and prepare for how those 3.5 hours will go. But once it starts, you just cut it loose and you ride.
Cut it loose and ride, baby.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan is ready for his moment. Dad, this is another guy. We've talked about a lot of people that are walking into the pressure cooker, and Kyle Shanahan has been able to, at every turn, win his way through what would otherwise damn most coaches. Most recently with what happened with Trey Lance in this organization before the season. Missing that badly on a first-round pick that you guys couldn't make work normally would have doomed a front office, would have doomed the GM and the coach, and instead, because they got Mr. Irrelevant to play like an MVP MVP candidate. We paper over all that, but it's still Kyle Shanahan versus the elusive Super Bowl with a roster that gives them a really good shot going into this season. So, Dad, Green Bay did dominate the Cowboys last week. What's the biggest difference that you see in this matchup with the 49ers squad this weekend?
Well, I mean, they're certainly playing a similar team to motion, right? I believe San Francisco motions the most in the NFL. They're actually second most, and Green Bay is sixth. This is what we see now in the NFL, is put a step counter on motion guys before the play even starts of what they try and do. And it works so well for Green Bay against the Cowboys in confusing the secondary because the Romeo Doubs 3 times down the middle of the field, wide open. Musgrave, the 1 touchdown that he had wide open on a crossing route, deep crossing route. So they confused the Cowboys. Now, San Francisco, hell, they're used to seeing this in training camp against their own offense before you get into the season and start, playing the other team's defenses. So that to me is watching motion and does it confuse? That's normally what you see is a busted coverage because of motion, is the lack of communication on the defensive side on what you either change to or who has who. And that's when you see guys that are wide open. And whenever you see replays, you're like, oh, God, it's right there. You see where they blew it. Or, you got the crossing routes where you're hoping people run into one another, or you can get a pick, things like that. So that to me is one of the biggest things here. But, we talk about the receivers and the passing game between Purdy and Love. I mean, and what they've done, from a standpoint of throwing touchdowns. Purdy, 33 offensive touchdowns, 5th in the league. Love, 36 touchdowns, 4th in the league. I mean, there's all kind of stats here. But what I'm going to look for is, I mentioned earlier, Aaron Jones, 4 straight games of over 100 yards rushing. This O-line had been playing well. If they can run the ball well, Jordan Love in play action is absolute money. But Eric Armstead is back, and the D-line for San Francisco. Javon Hargrave coming over from Philadelphia has been fantastic, right? I mean, he has been absolute money for them since he's come over, from tackles and from sacks as well. And if you want to watch 2 of the most active linebackers in the NFL, watch Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw from San Francisco. They are active and they are physical. They are going to smoke you. So those 2 against this interior O-line and Aaron Jones, Mike, is going to be one of the monster keys in this game, because if they try and run the ball, especially on first down, and it's 2nd and 8, that's a monster win for San Francisco.
Those 2 guys you mentioned are, in my mind, the biggest difference between what happened to Dallas last week and what's probably going to happen this week. Because on paper, when you look at like the season-long rushing numbers, even the back half of the season, the 49ers rush defense isn't markedly different than the Dallas Cowboys rush defense. But we saw linebacker level for the Cowboys was an absolute nightmare. They had safety bodies down there in the box trying to tackle these guys, and it was absolute hell. You get offensive linemen. When Elton Jenkins can go up to the second level and just put a paw on you and displace you by 4 yards, the math ain't mathin' for Dallas in that point. Dre and Fred, Love don't live here anymore, man. This is pain that you are going to get at the linebacker level from these guys. And so I think for Matt LaFleur, who on the other side, Kyle Shanahan gets a ton of the credit. You talked about the motion for both these teams. These guys were part of that coaching staff in Washington everyone talks about. Matt's a guy that went up through the McVay coaching tree. So he knows how to use this stuff. They've got a good young tight end room, like a lot of the other young skill players on their team, to try and help, I think, create some interesting scenarios before the snap to see if they can slow those guys down a bit, because Fred Warner's a pterodactyl playing linebacker. He's scary as hell.
And I think this is more about learning about, at least right here, about Green Bay. Because San Francisco, we know about Brock Purdy. We know about Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, who was the tight end this year, right? It's normally been Travis Kelce as your all-pro tight end. It was Kittle this year. He had the money year. So the depth and depth of great talent they have on offense is second to none, without question. So we have known about them. That's why I keep bringing up Green Bay, and people don't, unless you're a Packer fan or a big-time football fan, we have a lot of, but still, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. These are rookies. These are rookies who have carried Green Bay. And then you have Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, second-year guys who have helped carry this team. I mentioned before, 7 players with 25 or more receptions. I mean, it's crazy. They've had 117 explosive plays this year. That's the most in the Matt LaFleur area. And then you get to Jordan Love, and a lot of it is because of these receivers. I am such a third quarter guy, Mike. You know that. When you go into the locker room, make your adjustments. How do you come out in the third quarter? What do you make different? Jordan Love is number 1 in passer rating in the third quarter. Number 1. And in the second half, he's number 1 in TDs. He's passing TDs, total TDs, passing yards, and rating, he's number 10. But in the second half, he has been money. The third quarter, he has been money. So how competitive does it stay? I guarantee you, if Green Bay wins the toss, they're going to take the ball again, like they did against Dallas, to try and set the tempo like they did against Dallas. Maybe a little different here. Like you said, a huge difference at the linebacking core to try and be able to stop that run for Green Bay this year or this week with San Francisco as opposed to Dallas.
I do think, and it's usually reductive when we say this, but it's going to come down to what Jordan Love can do in this game, because the Green Bay Packers rush defense has been bad for most of the year. Kenny Clark's a monster, and he gave a lot of the interior defense. Zach Martin included, by the way, gave him a really tough game on the interior, especially versus the run. But this team overall, 23rd in EPA per play allowed against the rush on the season. And this is a 49ers team. I know Christian McCaffrey had the calf late in the season, but they're built to hurt you down the middle in a lot of ways. This is one of the most complex run games in the NFL. We talked about the rush defense and the other side. So, Dad, the biggest area I look is, can Jordan Love do anything close to what he did in the first round? Jordan Love was 17th in time to throw during the regular season. He held the ball the second longest of any quarterback on Wild Card Weekend, 2.86 seconds per pass, going up against a defense down the stretch of the season since Week 10, led the NFL with 30 sacks once that Chase Young acquisition came over.
Last thing I'll say is, and I said this before, Green Bay did a great job of stopping Dallas from yards after the catch. They tackled him. If they caught a 3-yard pass, they tackled him at 3 yards. So I'll say it again. Since 2017, San Francisco, most yards after the catch in the NFL. They live off that. Green Bay needs to stop that again like they did against Dallas, and it's going to be a little more difficult against San Francisco.
Yeah, given the weapons they've got in the middle there of Kittle, we didn't even talk about Deebo Samuel. I'm picking the Niners to win this game. I know you can't pick it. I'd probably take Green Bay and the points because they're riding a heater, but this is going to be the tallest task so far of the Jordan Love era. excited to welcome back Clay Matthews, Super Bowl champion, Green Bay Packers Hall of Famer, kind enough to join us again here on behalf of DoorDash. And Clay, it's been a great NFL season. I know you've been working with them and with DraftKings all year on that, helping people try and go after some money. And now it's the playoff time, and I understand the stakes are even higher at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. We all know that DoorDash is bringing the best game day grub. But if you enjoyed the DraftKings Challenge DoorDash and Clay Matthews series, then now we have a playoff bracket with opportunities to win up to $30,000 in cash prizes. So I know this regular season was a lot of fun for me and hopefully for everyone else. So we're just going to keep this thing rolling through the playoffs.
There we go. Rocking and rolling. You're used to making a deep postseason run, so no stranger there. And now everyone can try their hand with that too. And speaking of the postseason, Clay, the last time we talked with you, we talked about your old coach facing off against your old team in the Cowboys-Packers game. Obviously, that one went sideways in a way I don't think a lot of people could have predicted. How stunned were you by that?
I was to a certain extent, especially with the success that Dallas had at home. Being the number one offense and just having so much firepower, just feeling like perhaps this was, I wouldn't say their year, but they were just operating on all cylinders. But one of the things we talked about last week was the fact that it's not about who is technically the best team, it's who's the hottest team. And we talked about the Packers being one of the hottest teams, and they just went in there and took it to them from the first snap. So in one respect, I'm surprised, but at the same token, I'm not to see that trend continue in the NFL, which is the hottest team is just rolling right now.
They certainly were rolling there. Green Bay got it up however they wanted it. And at the end of it, we got the announcement yesterday that Mike McCarthy would be brought back as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Did that part stun you at all? How many people seem to be ready to call for his job after the success they've had so far, albeit in the regular season under his tenure in Dallas?
I think it's social media that's calling for his jobs. I think it's the people who thankfully aren't making the decisions. When you look at his record and his resume, but specifically with his time in Dallas, I think it's 3 or 4 12-win seasons. And yeah, they haven't had the success in the playoffs, but I mean, good luck finding another coach. I mean, obviously, Belichick got, relieved of his duties, but ultimately, much like it is to find a good quarterback, it's difficult to find a good head coach. And, I think he takes unfair criticism, but if you also compare him to some of the greats like Harbaugh, who's obviously currently coaching, and Tomlin, and even Andy Reid, if you look at his first 4 years in Kansas City, they're very much similar. So I feel like it's the narrative right now on social media, but I mean, he's a great coach. And I mean, you heard it from his quarterback in Dak saying a lot of his success is directly tied into what Mike is teaching and coaching over there. So, I'm not surprised. I would have been surprised if he was let go, if he was, fired. So I'm happy to see him back. And, listen, hopefully they can have another fantastic season and he can win some playoff games and kind of, beat that narrative, so to speak.
Why do you see so many players sticking up for him? It felt like a lot of voices from that locker room came to his defense quickly. What about him as a head coach makes players so ready to go to bat for him?
You just feel like, you're on the same page as him. He's got your best interest in mind. And that comes from personal experience of 10 years of playing with him. I mean, I can't tell you how many times he's gone to bat for me and we have those one-on-one meetings and you just feel like he's in your corner. He'll be the first to let you know he's from Pittsburgh. So he kind of wears that on his sleeve and will let you know that, he's in your corner and he'll be in your, right behind you at whatever, a moment in time. So ultimately, I think he just, people recognize not only is he a great coach, but also that he's got your back. There's not a lot of separation between the coach and player. It very much seems like you're on the same playing field.
So he's sticking around with his job. There's a lot of coaching hires being made right now. One was interesting, and it seems like it's kind of part of a trend. Gerard Mayo takes over after Bill Belichick, you mentioned, being ousted in New England. And we're seeing a lot of linebackers right now falling into these head coaching roles. DeMeco Ryans had a ton of success in Houston this year. Antonio Pierce took over halfway through the season in Las Vegas. I'm curious from your perspective, what is it about the position of linebacker in particular that makes guys such quality candidates for something like head coach?
Sure. Well, I can speak from my firsthand experience. When I played, outside linebacker, you only had to worry about so much. Perhaps you're dropping in the zone, you're dropping in the flats. You're rushing the passer, holding outside leverage. And then when I was moved to play inside linebacker, it's not just about knowing 2 or 3 things. I mean, you've got to know where your D-line is fitting. You've got to be reading the offense. You've got to know, obviously, quarterback cadence and their pre-snap signals. You got to know where the guys on the back end are. So I think it's a more cerebral position and requires you to know more of the offense and defense in general. You can't just lock in on your position. And furthermore, you're the leader of the defense. Usually it's the one that has the microphone that other guys look up to. So you kind of take on this position of authority and kind of the coach on the field. And, you see that from Fred Warner up there in San Francisco and Smith in Baltimore, and going back to, guys like Ray Lewis. They're the leader of not only the defense, but sometimes it transcends to the entire team. And it just seems like a natural transition once they get out of the league to, be a GA, kind of assistant coach, and work their way up because they have all that knowledge and leadership ability.
So one other thing you've got a lot of experience with, in addition to being a great linebacker, understanding what makes those guys tick, playing in Green Bay, you played in a lot of cold games. And we saw this past weekend, the temperatures dipped down pretty low. There was a lot of snow. The game had to get moved in Buffalo. And then you had record-setting cold in Kansas City. And we saw the way that Miami team that had been a high-flying offense all year came in and really didn't look like themselves. Did you see a lot of that over the course of your career, where teams that were either dome teams or teams that were warm weather teams came in and really struggled with you guys like that? Is that something everyone's pretty aware of?
Yeah, I do believe it is a home field advantage when you're bringing in a warm weather team to a cold environment. But at the same token, everyone has to deal with the elements. So not only is it, you got to get the right cleats, you got to understand there's less explosive movements without slipping, but it's also the mentality and having that kind of mental fortitude and toughness to understand, all right, we're going to be out in these elements for 4 hours. And when you obviously practice and live in those cold elements, it makes it that much easier, and you kind of play into it in the city, and the fans, they learn to thrive in it.
So for you, what was the, like, getting ready for the game? Were you a sleeves off kind of guy? What did you need to do as far as the prep to get ready to be a vet playing in the cold?
There wasn't a whole lot to it. I tend to tell people this quite a bit. What was it like playing up there in Green Bay? I think when you live in it and it's a gradual decline in temperatures from 70 to 60, 50, 40, 30, and it just continues to go down, you get used to it. And as I just said, it kind of plays to your advantage. It's the home field advantage, whereas perhaps if you're playing down in Miami, it's going to be beautiful weather, but it's going to be very similar to the greatest show on turf. So in that regard, it's just a mentality. It's letting people know that, when I was in Green Bay, if they were going to come through, they had to, play their best ball, and they were going to deal with some pretty terrible elements.
Have you ever seen anything like Patrick Mahomes' helmet literally shattering in the cold the way it did this weekend?
I've never seen that before. I was more amazed at how the refs just stopped the game and just, they were like, let's just let this one slide, give it, stop the clock, give him a new helmet, as opposed to calling a timeout. But I mean, that goes to show the helmet's working. But no, I've never seen anything like that. We've had some cold games there, but nothing in that regard.
Yeah, as you say, the helmet's definitely working. Everyone came out from the helmet side, from the league side. They're like, no, this is a good thing. This means it's all going the right way here. So, Clay, we know you got a lot going on, man, so we appreciate you taking the time down here. We're sad to see the Christmas tree in the Matthews household now gone at this point here, man. It was a big, beautiful tree for everyone that watched last time, so I'm sorry you're no longer dealing with that beauty in your house now.
Well, I think we're the only house in the neighborhood who sells the Christmas lights up. So it's only a matter of time before the HOA says, we're going to get fined or nicked for not taking them down. So we're still holding on, and, perhaps we'll move straight to Valentine's Day next.
There we go. The Matthews household holding strong with the holiday spirit in the face of fines potentially coming from the HOA. Clay, can't thank you enough joining us on behalf of DoorDash, all the cool work you're doing there. We really appreciate it, man.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having me back on.
time to wrap this thing up the way we always do. This, that, the third, 3 quick stories to send everybody into the weekend, the divisional round, one of the best sports weekends of the year. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Try and catch us live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, all that good stuff. Let somebody know we're out here clanging and banging Monday through Friday live. But if you miss any of that or our great guests like Clay Matthews III, who was kind enough to join us today, you can catch that wherever you get your podcasts or available here on YouTube right when we get done. Let's get to this, that, and the third, Dad, and let's fillet up some beef here. Good old-fashioned Twitter beef that started during Wild Card weekend. The Philadelphia Eagles were losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Jalen Hurts was under siege against the Blitz the whole night, which prompted former Washington Commanders offensive coordinator Jay Gruden to tweet something to the effect of, I feel bad for Jalen Hurts and how they're not protecting him. I apologize to any of my quarterbacks if I ever put you in a situation like that. Kind of just trying to have some fun with it. Robert Griffin III, one of the quarterbacks that he played with, decided to start tweeting in a back and forth that's basically ended with Robert accusing Jay Gruden of saying, I know where the bodies are buried there. You didn't have me prepared. He tried to do the classic content spin of come on my podcast and discuss it face to face here, Dad. So what did you make of this, and who should we start beef with? Because it seems like everybody in sports media is beefing with somebody right now publicly.
I just don't get it. You know what? It's tiring. It's just tiring to read about, let alone be involved in it. I don't want to pick a Twitter beef with anybody because I'm not good enough. I always had to go to my brother Greg to give me, bleep talking lines out on the field. I was 2 words, F you. That was it. That's all I had.
Wait, you had a trash talking ghostwriter?
Yes. Yes, I did. And occasionally I use it. For the most part, I didn't. I was too busy trying to not get beat on the play, keeping all the air in my lungs. So it just was F you to a guy that talked smack to me. So I was always amazed at that. So I don't want beef with anybody unless it's good humored beef. This isn't. I don't know. Does anybody win in this? I mean, what happens is nothing changes. People that like RG3 will be on his side. People that don't like RG3 won't be on his side. Same for Jay Gruden. That's how this works. The one thing I have learned about Twitter over the years is you can't change anybody's mind on whatever road they're going down, no matter how much you cuss at them, be nice to them, whatever, you're never going to change them. I don't care if it's sports, politics, religion, whatever in life. You are not changing anybody's opinion on Twitter because it's too easy to just type in your reply and not talk face-to-face with somebody. So that's how these things go.
Why can't people just be nicer on Twitter?
If they don't like you, they're against you.
I do think this one is interesting to a lot of people because that Washington situation was interesting. Having Kirk Cousins there, all the dynamic between the two. The winner in this, by the way, is Will Compton, who was on that team, who put out a great video about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that they referenced with that team there and how it was kind of an icy situation between Jay Gruden and Robert Griffin III because injury undermined what looked like a promising career at the start. I can tell you of my former coworkers who I want the least beef with, Chris Canty. Between being a guy who is a wanter of the smoke in any conflict and who also is just one of the most staggeringly large human beings I've ever seen. Because it came down to see it in person. Chris Canty would rip both my arms off and beat me to death with him. He is a terrifyingly large man.
And I think the person maybe we wouldn't mind having Twitter beef with is our buddy Jason Fitz, right?
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't mind having Twitter beef with him. Yeah.
He'll hear this. We could pass. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll hear this or see this, and he'll try and come back at us with something, and we'll laugh.
Yeah, and then we'll read it in his giggly Muppet voice, and it'll immediately remove all of the bite from whatever trash talk he was trying to put out there. So let's instead focus on celebrating somebody. And Jesse, we have talked about this kid on the show before. Our hero is going to be back and better than ever in college football next season.
University of Miami tight end Cam McCormick. He is returning for his 9th season of college ball. Let's go. So he's able to play a 9th season of college football because he had all these injuries, basically causing him to miss 4 seasons of football. Then there's that extra year of eligibility that athletes received as part of the COVID-19 pandemic situation. Guys, no college football player has ever had 9 seasons of eligibility before. To put it in perspective, how long McCormick has been in college, he was a member of the same Oregon recruiting class as Justin Herbert.
He was also a member of the same high school recruiting class as Rashawn Gary, Nick Bosa, and Jalen Hurts, all of whom we have watched in the NFL postseason so far this season. Dad, this guy's a hero. Modern day Van Wilder. I would love to see a GoPro strapped on this guy for his day-to-day interactions with his young-ass teammates.
We tell everybody in college now, stay in college forever. Cam is really trying to live that. And seriously, when he leaves, is he going to be a doctor? I mean, 9 years? I mean, that's plenty of time, right?
So Brian Floyd, a friend on Twitter, posted his degrees on here. So he's got a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and Communications with an emphasis in advertising from Oregon. He's also got a master's in advertising and brand responsibility from Oregon. And right now he is enrolled in Miami post-baccalaureate, which I'm guessing is... So when I was a 5th-year senior, I took non-degree seeking graduate classes. I took 3 classes, only 1 met on campus, and it was twice a week. And if it rained, I wouldn't go. I was essentially a professional athlete for my final year of college. I have a feeling that's what this might be like here. The activities and societies is what he's listed under there. So This guy is going to hang out in South Beach for a season on a Miami team that could be pretty good next year. So good for him.
Yeah, I mean, what's he possibly going to take at this point? So here it is real quickly.
Well, I mean, he was there last year, obviously, too. I should say.
Yeah. So here's his rundown, just in case anybody wants to know. And it started out fine. He went to Oregon in 16 and he redshirted. Okay. 17, he played in every game. So all going well, right? 18 in 2018, first game of the season, he hurt his ankle. He had multiple surgeries, so he missed all of 18 and he missed all of 19 because of that same ankle injury. 20 was a pandemic. 21, second game in, he blew out his Achilles. So now, and then 22, he played in all 13 games for Oregon. And then in 23, last year, he played for Miami, and now we'll play in Miami again. So unbelievable what he's gone through, and kudos to him. Living the life, stay in college forever, enjoy the experience, even though you're the old man on campus.
Cherish it, for the love of God.
God, so true.
Speaking of things that we want to cherish, let's, Jesse, send everyone off into the weekend with the most wholesome image humanly possible.
Yeah, no thoughts, just vibes. Joel Embiid on a merry-go-round. Need I say more? Okay, so Embiid was at the Sixers SYF Gala, which is the youth foundation, and we got this amazing video of him on a merry-go-round, just vibing. I mean, the vibes are immaculate, fellas. Look at him. Look at him. He's on a horse. He's having the time of his life. Now, this event actually took place after he played Nikola Jokic on Tuesday, outdueled him on the court. So there's some people on the internet who are suggesting that he was trolling him by riding the pony. I don't think that's true, but just a happy coincidence.
You know what? We do. We love happy accidents. I also just love big people doing normal people things.
Yeah.
Like anytime you can have someone that's as comically large as Joel Embiid is in a setting where we get to see, Dad, it's like we always campaign in the Olympics to have a normal person competing in the event so you can see just how high the degree of difficulty is. These are always fun because we see these guys on the court in the context of each other and they look tall, but you never have the full appreciation until you're down there or until you see Joel Embiid riding a merry-go-round that normally little kids at the mall ride.
I was going to say, to be fair, it's not just like it's usually for children, I would say. So
Yeah. I did an Eagles game last year, and I was on the sideline before the game, and he came down on the field, and we just chatted for a brief second, and it's ridiculous that looking up to him is just ungodly. But I will say that ride is one of the few rides that goes around in a circle that I can do. Those are the death of me. Those are the death of me at any amusement park. Yeah, I can't go into like teacups at Disney. I'll throw up.
I hate the rotary ride because being a larger guy, the one where the bottom drops out and it just sticks you to the wall with the centrifugal force. I was so heavy as a kid, I would slide down and end up getting choked by my shirt on the ride and giving myself a wedgie as I slid down the wall. Enjoy the divisional round. Download, subscribe, rate, review us. Have a good weekend.